The manager tore up the poor boy's ticket, not knowing the owner saw everything. Caleb pressed the crumpled envelope tighter to his chest, his fingers stiff with cold. The wind whipped down the city streets like it had a purpose, slicing through the holes in his second-hand jacket and tugging at his scarf, a once white strip of flannel now stained and fraying. His shoes, 2 sizes too big, slapped against the wet sidewalk with every hesitant step. He stood across the street from the Briarside Hotel, its tall glass windows glowing golden against the steel-grey afternoon. Inside, people moved like they had nowhere urgent to be, men in wool coats and women in elegant heels, chatting softly, sipping from white porcelain cups. Caleb stared long enough for the doorman to notice. The man didn't wave, he didn't smile, he just adjusted his gloves and looked away. Caleb's stomach grumbled, loud and sharp. He glanced down at the envelope in his hand, its paper wrinkled and slightly torn at the corner. On it, in careful fading ink, was typed, "Meal voucher, Grace Harbor Foundation, partnered with Briarside Hotel, 1 lunch included, present at front desk." He had read it a dozen times already. He didn't understand most of the fancy words, but 1 lunch included was all that mattered. Drawing in a breath, he crossed the street. The glass doors hissed open as he stepped inside. Instantly, the warmth wrapped around him like a lie. The scent of coffee, lemon polish, and expensive fabric flooded his senses. The lobby was quiet, serene. Everything shined. Marble floors, gold trim, crystal lights overhead that looked like icicles catching fire. Caleb walked carefully to the front desk, trying not to let his wet shoes squeak. A tall woman in a sleek navy suit stood behind the counter, typing something without looking up. Her name tag read, "Abigail, Hotel Manager." He cleared his throat. "Excuse me, ma'am, I have this—" He held out the envelope. Abigail glanced down, then looked at him fully for the first time. Her eyes, lined with sharp eyeliner and colder than the outside wind, narrowed. She took the envelope with 2 fingers like it was something dirty. "What is this?" "It's from the Grace Harbor Foundation," Caleb said, his voice small. "They said I could come here for lunch." Abigail read the note. Her face didn't move for a long second. Then she exhaled through her nose, soft but sharp. "This can't be real." She turned slightly so others behind the counter could hear. A bellhop paused mid-step. A guest looked up from a leather armchair nearby. Caleb shifted his weight, confused. "It's what they gave me. I didn't do anything." "Let me explain something to you," Abigail interrupted, her tone smooth but venomous. "This is Briarside Hotel, not a soup kitchen. You can't just walk in off the street with a scribbled note and expect to be fed like a paying guest." She held up the envelope, and without a second of hesitation, tore it clean down the middle. Caleb blinked. His mouth opened, but no words came. "I don't know who gave this to you," Abigail continued, her voice louder now, "but this is a scam, and you're not the first. Now, out." A security guard stepped forward. Caleb instinctively stepped back, his cheeks burning with shame. The room felt silent and huge. His ears buzzed. "Is there a problem here?" The voice came from near the fireplace, low, calm, and strangely commanding. A man stood there, tall, wearing a grey wool coat. He had a book tucked under one arm and a soft scarf draped around his neck. His face was hard to read, clean-shaven, pale, maybe early 40s. Abigail gave a stiff smile. "Not at all, sir. Just a bit of confusion." "That paper you tore up," the man interrupted, his voice even but firm. "May I see it?" She hesitated. The security guard froze mid-step. "It was fake," she said, but the words wavered. "Then there's no harm in letting me see it." Abigail's jaw flexed. Slowly, she reached into the trash beside the desk and pulled out the 2 pieces. The man in the grey coat took them, carefully aligning the tear. His eyes scanned the page for no more than 5 seconds before he looked back up. "Grace Harbor Foundation," he said quietly. "This hotel is listed as a partner." "That's outdated," Abigail insisted, her voice rising. "They've abused the arrangement, kids showing up with notes, disrupting our guests. It was never properly formalized. But you didn't check. You didn't ask. You tore it up in front of him without a second thought." Caleb was still frozen in place, watching the man with wide eyes. He wasn't sure if this stranger was about to save him or make things worse. The man turned to the desk phone. "I'd like to speak with someone from upper management, right now." Abigail's face turned slightly red. "I'm the manager here." "I said upper management," the man replied without looking at her. Around the lobby, people were starting to notice. A couple near the coffee table whispered. A concierge glanced toward the scene and then away again, uncertain. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the ticking of the antique clock near the elevator. Abigail folded her arms, but said nothing. The man in the grey coat walked toward Caleb and knelt slightly to meet his eyes. "What's your name, son?" "Caleb." The man nodded. "You're not in trouble. Sit over there for a moment." He pointed to a velvet chair against the far wall. Caleb obeyed, his limbs moving on their own. He sank into the chair, dizzy and unsure if he'd cry or throw up. He still didn't know who the man was, but something had shifted. The way the room had hushed around him felt like a storm about to break. Not against him this time, but around him. From across the room, he heard the man speaking softly on the phone, calm as ever, holding the torn voucher like it was evidence. And in that moment, Caleb felt it for the first time since he'd stepped inside. Hope. The name Benjamin Whitmore wasn't spoken aloud, not yet, but it hung in the air like a scent only certain people could detect. The moment he requested to speak with upper management, staff exchanged glances. Not alarmed, more like startled into recognition. Benjamin stood near the lobby desk, his phone pressed to his ear. His posture remained composed, but the quiet fire in his voice signaled he was no ordinary guest. Abigail paced behind the counter, the torn voucher now conspicuously absent from the trash. The concierge quietly stepped away and made a call of his own. Caleb, still huddled in the velvet chair, hugged himself. The cushion was too soft, the room too warm. It made his hunger sharper somehow. His head swam with the overwhelming sense that something important had just happened, and that it wasn't over yet. Benjamin ended the call and turned to Abigail. "Let's speak somewhere private." Abigail hesitated. "Of course." They walked together through a frosted glass door marked "Staff Only," disappearing into the corridor that wound behind the public face of the hotel. The moment they were gone, the lobby began to breathe again. But not freely. Not yet. Across the street, Blake sat on the frozen stone ledge of an old fountain, the remains of its summer water now a dull ring of ice. He had the same kind of envelope Caleb once carried, clutched in both hands. But he wasn't going in. He had seen Caleb enter earlier. Then the shouting, the security, the tall woman tearing something apart. Blake had watched it all through the glass, heart racing. He'd nearly run then and there, but his stomach kept him anchored, his fingers, red from cold, twisted at the paper. He knew what was in it. He had checked a dozen times. The same voucher, same stamp from Grace Harbor Foundation, the same thin hope printed on thin paper. But the image of Caleb's face, pale and shrinking, kept him frozen in place. He wouldn't be the next one to get humiliated. Abigail closed the office door behind them with a soft click. Her desk was pristine, minimalist, everything in its place. Benjamin remained standing. "I'm not here in a personal capacity," he said. "I'm here because I've seen something deeply troubling and I want answers before I take this further. I assure you we have procedures," Abigail said quickly. "Protocols. That voucher was a mistake." "Let's talk about the mistake," Benjamin said, leveling his gaze at her. "You tore up a meal voucher from a registered partner organization without verification, without compassion, and did so in front of your staff and our guests." Abigail straightened her shoulders. "That program was causing problems, people taking advantage, disrupting the atmosphere. We had to be selective." "Selective?" Benjamin's voice didn't rise, but the room chilled anyway. "Or dismissive, because what I saw wasn't selectivity. It was a dismissal of a hungry child based on how he looked when he walked through the door." Abigail's lips parted, but no defense came. "I'm asking you plainly," Benjamin said. "Has this happened before?" Abigail glanced toward a drawer. Her silence was an answer. Benjamin walked around the desk. She didn't stop him. He opened the bottom drawer. Tucked beneath outdated guest surveys and a broken phone charger, was a small stack of envelopes, familiar, wrinkled, ignored. He pulled them out one by one, 7 in total, each bearing the same Grace Harbor Foundation seal, some unopened, others creased like they'd been handled and dismissed. "This," Benjamin said, holding up the stack, "is not a misunderstanding. It's a pattern." Abigail stepped forward. "You don't understand what it's like. Managing expectations, maintaining an image. This hotel caters to a clientele that includes me," Benjamin said. Silence. She blinked, her mouth opened again. Wait." Benjamin reached into his coat and withdrew a leather folio. He placed it on the desk, flipped it open, and turned it to face her. Her breath caught. The embossed seal of the Whitmore Hospitality Group, owners of Briarside and 5 other luxury hotels across the East Coast, gleamed under the office light. "I don't need to manage expectations," Benjamin said. "I set them." Word spread faster than coffee steam. Staff whispered behind counters. Housekeeping exchanged hushed glances in the elevator. Someone had seen Benjamin go into Abigail's office. Someone else had spotted the envelope stack. The quiet, polished rhythm of Briarside had begun to falter. The kitchen supervisor, a round man named Pete, leaned over to a waitress and muttered, "You hear what happened to the kid with the voucher?" She nodded. "I served him once last winter. Sweet boy." "Always said thank you." Pete frowned. "If that gray coat guy is who I think he is, things are about to shift." Blake stood, then sat again. He had no plan. The cold had sunk into his knees. He needed to move, needed to eat, but the fear was louder than the hunger now. Then the hotel doors opened. Caleb stumbled out, face pale, breath fogging the air. He looked around wildly, not seeing Blake at first. His legs wobbled beneath him. Blake stepped forward, opening his mouth to call out, but before he could speak, Caleb collapsed. Blake sprinted across the icy sidewalk. "Caleb! Hey!" Inside, the doorman shouted for help. In a blur, Benjamin was out the door, coat billowing like a storm cloud. He reached Caleb's side, dropping to his knees. "He's burning up," Benjamin said quickly, checking Caleb's pulse, then lifting him with practiced ease. A valet ran to open the door. Benjamin carried Caleb back through the lobby, holding him like something rare and breakable. This time no one looked away. No one whispered. They watched. Caleb barely stirred as Benjamin laid him gently on a bench near the kitchen hallway. Pete rushed in with a warm blanket and a cup of hot water. "Take him to the staff kitchen," Benjamin said, "and make sure he eats, not just soup, real food." Abigail, now standing just outside the office, opened her mouth, but Benjamin cut her off with a glance that froze her in place. He turned to the concierge. "Call Nancy Hale. Tell her to come in person." The staff member swallowed. "Yes, sir." Benjamin straightened, looking once more at the torn pieces of Caleb's voucher, now carefully flattened on the front desk. Outside, snow began to fall, but inside Briarside Hotel, the temperature had shifted. And beneath velvet golden glass, something long hidden had begun to unravel. The moment Caleb's body gave way on the frozen pavement, time seemed to fracture. Benjamin was already moving before anyone else understood what was happening. The revolving doors of the Briarside Hotel spun open with a hiss of warm air as he crossed the threshold at a near run, his grey coat flaring behind him. Guests turned, startled. A woman dropped her phone. The doorman shouted a warning that came too late. Benjamin knelt beside Caleb, one knee on the icy ground, his hands steady as he checked the boy's pulse. It was fast, too fast. Caleb's lips had lost their color, and his breath came in shallow bursts that fogged weakly in the air. "Get the door," Benjamin said, his voice sharp now, stripped of its earlier calm. A valet rushed forward. Benjamin lifted Caleb without hesitation, cradling him as though the weight meant nothing, though it clearly did. The crowd parted instinctively as he carried the boy back inside. Conversations died mid-sentence. No one filmed. No one spoke. The sight of a well-dressed man carrying a starving child through the polished heart of the hotel cut through the room like a blade. Inside, the warmth hit hard. Caleb stirred, letting out a faint sound that might have been his name. "I've got you," Benjamin murmured, more to himself than to the boy. "You're safe." He didn't take Caleb to the lobby couch. He didn't call for a guest doctor. Instead, he turned sharply down the narrow hallway marked staff only, pushing past swinging doors and into the kitchen. The kitchen was alive with motion and noise, metal clanging, burners hissing, voices calling times. But it faltered when Benjamin entered. He laid Caleb gently on a prep table cleared in seconds by startled cooks. "Blanket," someone said. "Water," said another. Pete, the kitchen supervisor, was already moving. "Low blood sugar," he muttered, checking Caleb's forehead. "Kid hasn't eaten." "Soup first," Benjamin said, "then bread, slow." A young line cook hesitated. "Are we allowed?" Benjamin looked at him. The cook was already ladling soup. Caleb's eyes fluttered open briefly. He saw white lights overhead, unfamiliar faces leaning in, steam rising from a bowl. For a moment panic flared, until he recognized Benjamin's voice. "You're okay," Benjamin said. "Just eat when you can." Caleb nodded weakly. Around them, the kitchen staff worked with a focus that felt different from the usual rush. This wasn't service. This was care. And questions began to form. "I thought those foundation lunches were approved," one dishwasher whispered. "They are," Pete replied quietly. "Or they were supposed to be." Another cook frowned. "Then why—" No one finished the sentence. They didn't need to. Outside, the snow had thickened, softening the city into a blur of white and grey. Blake stood near the fountain again, stamping his feet to keep warm. He had seen Benjamin carry Caleb inside. His chest still felt tight from the fear of it. He turned at the sound of heels on stone. Abigail approached, her coat thrown hastily over her suit, her smile sharp and rehearsed. She stopped a few feet away, careful not to seem threatening. "Blake, is it?" she asked sweetly. He stiffened. "How do you know my name?" She glanced at the envelope clutched in his hand. "You're from the Foundation. I've seen a few of you." Blake didn't answer. Abigail sighed as if burdened by kindness. "Listen, what happened inside was unfortunate. But misunderstandings happen. We don't want this turning into something bigger than it needs to be." She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded bill, then another, then another. She held them out. Cash. Enough to make Blake's breath catch. "Go home," she said softly. "Get something warm. Forget what you saw." Blake stared at the money, his fingers curled tighter around the envelope. "No," he said. Abigail's smile faltered. "Be reasonable." "My friend collapsed," Blake said, his voice shaking now. "You tore his paper up." Her eyes hardened. "This doesn't concern you." Blake took a step back. "It does." For a long moment, Abigail looked like she might snap. Then she pressed the money into Blake's hand anyway. "Take it," she hissed, "or things get harder for you." Blake looked down at the bills. Then he turned and walked, straight toward the hotel doors. "Hey!" Abigail called. He didn't stop. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. The lobby felt colder somehow despite the heat. Staff moved carefully, avoiding Abigail's gaze. Guests sensed it too, the subtle wrongness beneath the luxury. The doors opened and Blake walked in, cheeks red from cold, eyes blazing. He went straight to the front desk. "I need to speak to the man in the grey coat," he said. Abigail rushed in behind him. "You don't need to listen to this." Blake slapped the bills down on the marble counter. "She tried to pay me," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "to keep quiet." The sound of it echoed. Benjamin emerged from the kitchen hallway slowly. His eyes moved from the money to Abigail's face. "Is that true?" he asked. Abigail opened her mouth. Before she could answer, the revolving doors turned once more. A woman entered, snow dusting her dark coat, her posture calm and deliberate. She didn't look around for direction. She already knew where to go. Nancy Hale crossed the lobby with measured steps, her presence silencing what little noise remained. She stopped beside Benjamin and gave him a brief nod. "Benjamin." "Nancy." Abigail's face drained of color. Nancy didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She spoke with the staff first, the concierge, the kitchen supervisor, the waitress who had served Caleb months ago. She listened, She asked precise questions. She took notes in a slim leather notebook. Then she knelt in front of Blake. "Tell me everything," she said gently. Blake did. He showed her the envelope. He told her about the shouting, the torn paper, the bribe. He told her about Caleb collapsing in the snow. Nancy closed her notebook. She turned to Abigail. "Come with me." They disappeared into the office. No one followed. No one dared. Inside, the door closed with a soft, final click. The meeting was brief. When the door opened again, Abigail walked out alone. Her shoulders were stiff, her eyes unfocused. She didn't look at anyone as she passed through the lobby and out into the snow. Nancy remained. She looked at the staff gathered around, at Benjamin, at Blake. "Power," she said calmly, "is not about who you can remove from a room. It's about who you make room for." She turned toward the kitchen hallway. "Make sure the boys are fed," she added. "Properly." The quiet storm had passed through Briarside Hotel, and nothing would be the same again. The kitchen no longer felt like a place Caleb and Blake weren't supposed to be. It had been 2 weeks since the snowstorm outside the Briarside Hotel. 2 weeks since a crumpled voucher and a soft-spoken man in a grey coat changed the direction of their lives. Now the scent of garlic, roasted chicken, and baked bread filled their mornings. Instead of being watched, they were welcomed. Instead of being pitied, they were taught. Their uniforms weren't fancy, simple aprons, name tags, hairnets, but they wore them like medals. Caleb stood by the prep table, carefully slicing cucumbers into thin, even rounds. He had learned the difference between a julienne and a chiffonade, how to hold a knife without hurting himself, how to season soup with the back of a spoon. Pete, the kitchen supervisor, barked instructions that sounded gruff, but hid a surprising warmth. Blake stood a few feet away, tending to the dish station, organizing plates like puzzle pieces, humming to himself. Every now and then, he glanced at Caleb and grinned. They didn't talk much about what had happened. It wasn't needed. Their presence here, the way they moved through the kitchen with growing confidence, said more than words ever could. Upstairs, the hotel moved at its usual polished rhythm. Guests came and went, unaware that anything had ever been different. The Briarside Hotel hadn't made a statement. No press release, no charity gala, no photo ops. That had been Nancy's condition. "This isn't charity," she'd told the board. "It's partnership. Quiet, respectful partnership. We don't take pictures of dignity. We practice it." And so the policy changed. The Grace Harbor Partnership was quietly restored. Vouchers were honored without question. No child was turned away. Meals were served in silence, not as a favor, but as a promise kept. Only a few staff members even knew who had made the change happen. Most just noticed the tension was gone, that things felt right again, and at the center of it was Benjamin, still quiet, still precise, now often seen near the kitchen in conversations with Pete, or sitting with Nancy over tea in the side lounge. One morning, Benjamin and Nancy walked through the back corridors of the hotel, watching Caleb and Blake work. "They're adapting fast," Nancy said. "They're good kids," Benjamin replied. "They'll need more than soup and kindness to get through this world." "They're not just getting kindness," Benjamin said. "They're getting a place." Nancy nodded. She tapped her pen against her notebook, then looked up. "You're still not putting your name on the new program?" "No," Benjamin said. "This isn't about names or legacy. It's about making something that doesn't need applause to be real." Nancy smiled. "That's rare." Benjamin tilted his head. "So is a second chance." That afternoon, Caleb stood at the service window, holding a tray with trembling hands. It was his first time stepping out of the kitchen with food in hand, not as a guest, but as part of the staff. The dining room was bright with winter light filtering through tall windows. Tables were set, candles flickered, and quiet conversations floated through the air like background music. Caleb walked slowly, the tray balanced perfectly. He approached a table near the center, where a woman in a green coat sat reading the newspaper. He set the water glass down in front of her, careful not to spill. She glanced up and smiled. "Thank you." Caleb nodded. "You're welcome, ma'am." His voice was steady. He turned and walked back toward the kitchen, his steps growing more confident with each one. As he passed the mirrored wall near the host stand, he caught his reflection. his apron, his name tag. His eyes no longer hollow, no longer afraid. Blake met him at the swinging door, towel slung over his shoulder. "Good job," Blake said with a nudge. Caleb gave a small smile. "I didn't drop it. Yet." They both laughed softly. In the lounge, Benjamin watched them from afar. His coat was folded beside him, the grey fabric now softened at the edges. Nancy sat across from him, sipping tea, a notebook closed on the table. "Think they'll stick around?" she asked. "I think they've already found something worth staying for." Outside, the snow was melting. The city, as always, kept moving. But here, inside the walls of Briarside, something had settled into place. A system mended, a wrong righted, a future rewritten. That night, the last guest left the dining room. The lights dimmed, the chairs were tucked in, the silver polished. Caleb walked to the far corner table, his favorite one now. He filled a glass with water, not because it was needed, but because he could, because it was part of his job, part of who he was becoming. He set it down gently. No applause followed, no cameras, just the sound of the glass touching the wood, and a quiet pride that filled the room like warmth. Caleb stood for a moment longer, then turned off the light. The door closed behind him, and the table waited for whoever came next.